Picture this. You're at a state dinner in the atmospheric ruins of old Panama City, anticipating an evening rubbing shoulders with heads of state and global dignitaries. But the reality unfolding is far stranger. Instead of power brokers, you're surrounded by performers clad in little more than loincloths and feathers, brandishing swords. Mark Zuckerberg, the enigmatic founder of Facebook and your boss, looks profoundly unhappy, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Your planned meticulous seating arrangement, designed for diplomatic finesse, has been sabotaged by a rival colleague. Negotiations with a key Panamanian official are bombing spectacularly, and your eventual escape, it involves a terrified sprint across cobblestones, in heels, frantically dodging charging horses that are part of some unexpected, chaotic medieval reenactment. Does this sound like a bizarre fever dream, perhaps a scene from a surreal corporate satire? For Sarah Wynn-Williams, then Facebook's Director of Global Public Policy, it was just another Tuesday, or rather, a Tuesday that vividly encapsulates the whirlwind of chaos, ambition, and often staggering unpreparedness that characterized Facebook's relentless global expansion. This isn't merely a wild anecdote, it's the opening scene directly from Sarah Wynn-Williams' explosive and essential memoir, Careless People. During her 7 years inside the social media behemoth, from 2009 to 2016, she occupied a unique vantage point, advising Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg through a period of unprecedented, hyperspeed growth, tumultuous international challenges, and mounting ethical crises. This wasn't just about tweaking algorithms or managing PR, it was about navigating the complex, often treacherous intersection of technology, global politics, culture, and human rights, frequently without a map or even a reliable compass. Welcome to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf, where we distill the critical insights from the books shaping today's most influential leaders. Today we're diving deep into the book, Careless People. Our goal isn't just to recount the scandals, though there are plenty, it's to unpack the book's core warnings about the intoxicating dangers of unchecked technological power, the insidious, ethical blind spots that can develop within hyper-growth companies, the alarming disconnect that can emerge between a stated idealistic mission and the grubby reality of market expansion, and ultimately, the profound human cost when ambition trumps caution. We're exploring the journey from wide-eyed idealism to crushing disillusionment, extracting crucial, often uncomfortable lessons for any leader grappling with the complexities of scale, ethics, and the immense responsibility that comes with shaping our increasingly digital world. What truly happens when the mantra of move fast and break things starts breaking people, communities, and even countries? Stick around as we delve into the heart of Facebook's careless era. How many of you, leaders and entrepreneurs listening right now, have ever been so utterly consumed by the potential of an idea, so convinced of a company's power to change the world, that you'd essentially invent a job for yourself and relentlessly pitch it until someone listened? That captures the initial energy Sarah Wynn-Williams brought to Facebook. Before joining, working in international development and policy, she experienced what she calls her Facebook epiphany. Scrolling through the platform, she saw beyond the updates about college parties and relationship statuses. She glimpsed its latent potential as a revolutionary tool for global politics, civic engagement, and cross-cultural connection, a force that could reshape international relations. Armed with this conviction, she began a persistent campaign, sending emails, leveraging connections, pitching her vision for a dedicated global policy role to a Facebook leadership that frankly wasn't particularly interested at first. Her initial communications were met with silence or polite dismissals. The prevailing internal view, even among senior figures like Marn Levine, a future key colleague, was skeptical. Facebook, in their eyes, was primarily focused on engineering challenges, user growth within existing markets, and as Wynn-Williams puts it, was still largely seen internally as a way for college kids to waste time. The idea that it needed a high-level strategist to navigate complex geopolitical landscapes seemed premature, almost irrelevant to their core mission of coding and scaling. This initial struggle highlights a crucial insight from the book about Facebook's early internal culture. It was overwhelmingly dominated by engineering prowess, driven by quantifiable growth metrics, and deeply rooted in a US-centric perspective. The subtleties of international law, diverse cultural norms, or the potential for the platform to be weaponized in unstable regions were simply not priorities for a leadership team laser-focused on hitting user numbers and preparing for an IPO. Mark Zuckerberg's interest lay primarily in the product and the technology. Sheryl Sandberg, while bringing operational discipline, was focused on building the advertising business. The global context was an afterthought. Wynn-Williams's eventual success in landing the role wasn't just about her persistence, it was about timing, as the platform's sheer scale began forcing these external issues onto the agenda. Yet, even once inside, she found herself battling this ingrained myopia. The internal culture was intense, demanding absolute commitment. Perks like free food and on-site services weren't just conveniences, they were, as described in the book, part of a quid pro quo designed to maximize employee time spent working. The infamous Little Red Book, given to new hires, reinforced the quasi-cult-like devotion expected, fetishizing productivity and often blurring the lines between work and personal life entirely. Wynn-Williams's initial role became a constant struggle, trying to inject long-term global strategic thinking into a company culture obsessed with short-term wins and often resistant to hearing about potential risks or complexities that didn't immediately impact the bottom line or user growth charts. This raises a vital point for all leaders listening. How often does your organization suffer from corporate myopia? Are you so focused on your immediate market, your current product iteration, your next quarter's results, that you fail to see the larger context, the long-term implications, the potential disruptions lurking just over the horizon? Wynn-Williams's experience underscores the critical importance of hiring for foresight, not just for solving today's problems. It's about actively building mechanisms to ensure diverse perspectives, especially those that challenge the status quo or highlight potential downstream consequences, are not just tolerated but actively sought out and integrated into strategic decision-making from the very beginning. It requires balancing the necessary idealism and passion that fuels innovation with a hard-nosed assessment of operational realities and potential negative externalities. Ask yourself, are you actively seeking perspectives that challenge your company's current worldview, especially regarding its long-term societal or global impact? Or are those voices being drowned out by the relentless drumbeat of immediate growth? So you finally landed that dream job, the one you pitched with missionary zeal. You're inside the rocket ship. Now what? Imagine your very first assignments involve managing high-stakes interactions with world leaders, navigating delicate diplomatic protocols. But there's a catch. Your ultimate boss, the CEO-founder, seems utterly uninterested, even slightly annoyed by these necessary governmental niceties, and your other influential boss, the COO famed for her polish and operational skill, has a tendency towards occasional startling gaffes in high-pressure situations. This was the reality Sarah Wynn-Williams faced almost immediately. The book recounts early, awkward encounters that betray Facebook's initial lack of diplomatic sophistication. Consider the visit of the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Wynn-Williams prepares meticulously, briefing Mark Zuckerberg on the importance of the meeting. His response, a flat refusal to participate, deeming it unimportant. The task then falls to Sheryl Sandberg, who deploys her considerable charm, yet, according to Wynn-Williams, the meeting remained superficial, a charm offensive, lacking real substance or strategic engagement on the policy issues that mattered. It was about managing the interaction, not building a meaningful relationship or understanding the country's perspective. Then there was the disastrous meeting with visiting German ministers, hassass about issues of online hate speech due to their country's history. The meeting started poorly, with confusion over the deliberately unfinished aesthetic of Facebook's office space, mistaken by the Germans for ongoing construction. It went downhill when, in response to concerns about extremist content, Marne Levine, attempting to build rapport, interjected with a jarringly out-of-context, "And I'm Jewish." The comment, meant perhaps to signal personal understanding, landed awkwardly, highlighting a fundamental disconnect and lack of cultural attunement. These anecdotes reveal deeper insights into Facebook's early struggles with global engagement. There was a profound lack of a coherent global strategy or diplomatic finesse. Operations were largely reactive, driven by crises or immediate market opportunities, rather than a proactive understanding of the diverse political and cultural landscapes they were entering. The contrasting leadership styles of Zuckerberg and Sandberg heavily influenced this dynamic. Zuckerberg, as portrayed in the book, often appeared awkward in formal settings, deeply uncomfortable with traditional politics, and primarily focused on the long-term technological vision. His disinterest created a vacuum, often filled by Sandberg, who possessed calculated charisma and a laser focus on business impact and operational efficiency. However, Wynn-Williams also depicts Sandberg as having a demanding, sometimes volatile, temper behind the scenes, capable of publicly dressing down employees, creating an environment where pushing back or delivering bad news could be perilous. This dynamic played out not just in external meetings, but also in crucial internal policy debates. The chapter titled, "What Do We Stand For?" details the internal struggles to define core principles, often resulting in vague or contradictory stances. A bizarre example cited is the project to promote organ donation sign-ups via Facebook. It was a high-profile initiative championed by Sandberg, only to be unexpectedly derailed by Zuckerberg at the last minute, seemingly on a whim, showcasing the internal power dynamics where even major projects could be overridden without clear strategic rationale. This struggle was particularly acute when applying Facebook's deeply ingrained US-centric values, particularly its near-absolutist stance on free speech, into global contexts like Germany, where laws and cultural norms around hate speech were vastly different and historically sensitive. The impulse was often to impose the Silicon Valley view rather than adapt or genuinely listen. The applications for leaders today are stark. Operating globally demands more than just translating your product. It requires deep cultural intelligence and tailored strategies for each market. You cannot simply export your domestic playbook and expect it to work. Understanding local laws, history, cultural sensitivities, and building genuine relationships with local stakeholders before a crisis hits is not a nice-to-have. It's essential for sustainable success and effective risk mitigation. Furthermore, Careless People serves as a cautionary tale about how the personalities and internal politics of leadership can directly impact external relations and critical internal decisions. When personal dynamics or power struggles between top executives dictate policy or resource allocation rather than strategic imperatives or ethical considerations, the entire organization suffers. The key takeaway here is clear. Don't parachute into global markets assuming you know best. Invest in understanding the local context deeply, empower local teams, and ensure your leadership dynamics foster open debate and strategically sound decisions, not reactive maneuvers shaped by personal preference or internal rivalries. Now let's turn to perhaps the most damning aspects of Wynn-Williams's account, the relentless pursuit of growth, even when it meant crossing significant ethical lines. After Facebook's IPO, the pressure intensified. The company was, as Wynn-Williams puts it, running out of road in terms of user growth in established markets. Eyes turned toward vast, untapped populations, most tantalizingly China, and also towards developing nations across the globe. This set the stage for stark choices. What compromises become acceptable when chasing exponential growth in challenging, often authoritarian, markets? Facebook faced this question head-on, particularly regarding its ambitions in China and its actions, or rather inactions, in Myanmar. The book details an intense, multi-year effort to gain access to the lucrative Chinese market, currently blocked by the Great Firewall. This wasn't just about exploring possibilities, it involved developing specific calculated compromises designed to appease the Chinese Communist Party. According to Wynn-Williams, this included actively building censorship tools tailored to Beijing's requirements, discussing potential arrangements for user data access that would make information available to state security services, and even creating custom technology potentially useful for surveillance. All this while, she asserts, often downplaying or misleading U.S. policymakers in Congress about the extent of these efforts, the immense ethical implications, the potential risk of contributing to the death, torture, and incarceration of Chinese citizens who might use a hypothetical censored version of Facebook, were consistently sidelined or rationalized away in the face of the overwhelming imperative to enter the market. Mark Zuckerberg's personal charm offensive towards Chinese leaders, including laborious efforts to learn Mandarin, underscored the strategic priority placed on China above almost all else. Contrast this massive investment of resources, time, and ethical compromise aimed at China with Facebook's approach to Myanmar, a country where the platform was rapidly gaining users, but where deep ethnic tensions were simmering. Wynn-Williams describes the situation in Myanmar as epitomizing lethal carelessness, despite repeated warnings from local activists and human rights groups about the platform being used to incite hatred and violence against the Rohingya Muslim minority. Facebook's response was tragically inadequate. For a long time, there was reportedly only one content moderator who spoke Burmese. The platform itself was ill-suited to the local context, lacking proper support for the common Unicode font, making it hard to detect problematic content algorithmically, and having reporting tools that were ineffective or confusing for local users. Warnings went unheeded, resources remained minimal, and the platform effectively became a fertile ground for hate speech and disinformation campaigns that directly contributed to real-world violence, ethnic cleansing, and ultimately, what the UN later termed genocide. The stark contrast couldn't be clearer. Billions of potential users in China warranted bending ethical principles and building bespoke tools for an authoritarian regime, while the safety of millions in a smaller, less commercially strategic market like Myanmar was neglected with devastating consequences. This pattern of prioritizing growth over safety also manifested in projects like Internet.org, later rebranded as Free Basics, pitched as a philanthropic effort to connect the unconnected. Wynn-Williams argues it was primarily driven by growth targets, offering a walled garden of Internet services that violated net neutrality principles, suffered from poor security, faced widespread criticism from digital rights groups globally, and ultimately failed to achieve its lofty goals despite enormous internal pushes and resources. This section of the book forces leaders to confront the concept of ethical fade, the psychological phenomenon where the ethical dimensions of a decision gradually disappear from view, overshadowed by other priorities like profit, market share, or hitting growth targets. Wynn-Williams's account demonstrates how this can happen incrementally, decision by decision, until significant principles are abandoned almost without notice. The critical lesson is understanding the immense long-term reputational, legal, and societal costs that come with sacrificing core principles for short-term market access or growth. It underscores the absolute necessity of robust internal controls, clear ethical red lines, and empowered dissent channels, especially when dealing with high-stakes decisions in complex international environments. As a leader, ask yourself and your team, how do we explicitly balance ambitious growth targets with our non-negotiable ethical principles? Have we defined those red lines clearly, particularly for operating in challenging markets? And crucially, do we have mechanisms in place to ensure those lines are never crossed, even when the pressure is immense? The relentless pursuit of growth and the pattern of ethical compromises inevitably led to a breaking point. The reckoning arrived vividly in November 2016 with the unexpected election of Donald Trump as President of the United States. Inside Facebook's Menlo Park headquarters, the reaction, as described by Wynn-Williams, was a mixture of shock, grief, disbelief, and among a smaller contingent, quiet satisfaction. But beneath the immediate emotional responses, a terrifying question began to loom large, first whispered, then debated more openly. Was it our fault? Did the platform we built, the tools we deployed, the policies we enacted, or failed to enact, play a decisive role in this outcome? Mark Zuckerberg's initial public reaction was dismissive, calling the idea that fake news on Facebook influenced the election a pretty crazy idea. However, Wynn-Williams recounts a pivotal moment shortly after on a flight to an APEC summit in Peru. During conversations with Sheryl Sandberg and encountering President Obama himself, who directly warned Zuckerberg about the dangers of misinformation on the platform, the reality began to sink in at the highest levels. Facebook wasn't just a neutral platform, it had become a powerful, perhaps the most powerful, engine for shaping political discourse and potentially electoral outcomes. Careless people details Facebook's deep, often unacknowledged, role in the 2016 election cycle. This wasn't just about passive misinformation spread. It involved actively embedding Facebook staff within political campaigns, including Trump's, to help them leverage the platform's powerful micro-targeting tools most effectively. It involved algorithms designed for maximum engagement, which inadvertently prioritized inflammatory and often false content. And critically, it involved a persistent lack of accountability and transparency regarding how these tools were being used and the scale of foreign interference occurring on the platform. Even as Zuckerberg began to grasp the platform's instrumental role, Wynn-Williams portrays a leader resistant to genuine contrition or fundamental changes that might impact engagement or growth. The focus remained on technical fixes and PR management rather than addressing the core architectural issues or business model incentives that facilitated the problems. This external reckoning coincided with a growing internal decay. Trust and morale among many employees eroded significantly. Initiatives like the Feminist Fight Club, mentioned in the book, emerged as employees tried to navigate what they perceived as a sexist and often toxic internal environment. Wynn-Williams details specific instances of alleged harassment and inappropriate behavior by senior executives like Communications VP Joel Kaplan, and the often inadequate responses from leadership, which further damaged internal trust. She describes a growing sense of hypocrisy, where the company's public pronouncements about connecting the world felt increasingly hollow compared to the internal culture and the real-world harms becoming apparent. The scandal involving manipulated research on emotional targeting further fueled feelings of complicity among staff. For Wynn-Williams personally, the cumulative toll became unbearable. Health crises were exacerbated by the relentless work demands and toxic interactions, particularly with Sandberg. The realization dawned that meaningful change from within, challenging the embedded carelessness and growth at all costs mentality, was likely impossible. Her persistent raising of concerns ultimately led not to reform, but to her being sidelined and eventually fired. This final phase of the story carries profound lessons about leadership responsibility in the digital age. Tech platforms, whether they initially intended to or not, hold immense power in shaping public discourse, political outcomes, and societal cohesion. Denying this influence or refusing to take responsibility for the negative consequences is not just negligent, it's dangerous. Leaders who isolate themselves in bubbles, unable to accept criticism, acknowledge harm, or learn from mistakes, ultimately fail their users, their employees, and society. Furthermore, the book is a stark reminder that a toxic internal culture, characterized by fear, harassment, hypocrisy, and the silencing of dissent, inevitably undermines the company's mission, erodes performance, and makes ethical breaches not just possible, but probable. The fish, as the saying goes, rots from the head. True leadership involves the courage to acknowledge mistakes, even catastrophic ones. It requires taking meaningful responsibility for the impact your products and decisions have on the world, intended or unintended, and it demands actively fostering a culture where ethical concerns are not just sidebar issues, but are central to the strategy, where employees feel safe speaking up, and where accountability extends all the way to the top, especially when things go terribly wrong. Sarah Wynn-Williams' Careless People is more than just an insider exposé. It's a vital, sobering account that resonates far beyond the walls of Facebook or Silicon Valley. It serves as a powerful case study, carrying critical warnings for anyone in a position of leadership today. Let's quickly recap the core takeaways. First, idealism, while essential for innovation, must be rigorously tempered with ethical foresight and a deep understanding of potential downstream consequences, especially when operating at scale. Good intentions are never enough. Second, global expansion demands more than just market entry. It requires profound cultural intelligence, proactive strategic planning, sensitive to local contexts, and genuine relationship building, not reactive crisis management and diplomatic blunders born from ignorance or arrogance. Third, the unchecked pursuit of growth, making it the primary or sole metric of success, creates fertile ground for ethical compromises that can lead to devastating real-world harm and irreparable reputational damage. Establishing and enforcing clear ethical red lines is non-negotiable. And finally, leadership accountability and cultivating a healthy, ethical internal culture are paramount. Toxic environments, denial of responsibility, and the suppression of dissent ultimately corrode everything, betraying the mission and jeopardizing long-term viability. As leaders, executives, innovators, and aspiring entrepreneurs, listening to CEO's Library, Wynn-Williams' story compels us to turn the mirror on ourselves and our organizations. Are we honestly and rigorously grappling with the potential negative impacts of our work, our products, our platforms? Are we building cultures where ethical concerns are not just boxes to be checked, but are genuinely heard, debated, and integrated into our core decision-making processes? Are we truly prepared, strategically and ethically, for the immense responsibilities that come with wielding influence in our interconnected digital world? Or are we, perhaps unintentionally, acting like careless people, smashing up things and creatures, and then retreating back into our money or our vast carelessness, leaving others to clean up the mess, as F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote in the quote that gives the book its title? To delve deeper into this unflinching narrative and its full context, we strongly encourage you to read Careless People by Sarah Wynn-Williams. For a full transcript of today's episode, accompanying visualizations, distilling key concepts, and more resources related to responsible leadership in the tech age, please visit ceoslibrary.com. And if you haven't already, subscribe to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf, for more deep dives into the books that offer critical insights for navigating the complexities of modern leadership and building truly impactful and responsible organizations. Don't let these lessons become yesterday's missed opportunities. Thank you for joining us.